Hello and welcome to Tochnyi Weekly. Before we start the stream, I just wanted to say that we used to broadcast simultaneously on Twitter. However, sadly, Elon Musk has decided that we now must pay him for the privilege of giving him free content for his social media platform. In our infinite wisdom, we decided to not do that, and instead we're just moving to YouTube full time. We kind of lost some eyeballs because of that. If you could please do like the press the little like button down there. Please subscribe to Tochnyi. It really helps spread the word. We're kind of newer to YouTube. We were more established on Twitter, so we really appreciate all the folks who came over from Twitter to YouTube. We appreciate all the new people from YouTube. Thanks so much for everyone's support. Hi chat. Love seeing all the lively exchanges from chat going on. I really appreciate you guys. So yeah, thanks to everyone for supporting what we do at Tochnyi. And so we have a pretty straightforward, I think, shorter broadcast for you today. You know, we always say that, and we rarely mean it. But I think in this case, it's probably a threat we will follow through with. It's just pretty much just me in the news, and I think there's maybe one thing I wanted to clear up with Colby about artillery numbers in the U.S. Since he's been following it for quite some time. Aside from that, we'll maybe do some quick Q&A, I'll go ahead and get started with the news. In operations this week, first story, according to Le Monde, the Bears Brigade, I'm sure it sounds better in Russian, associated with the Russian Defense Ministry, arrived in Burkina Faso in May of 2024. Their primary objective was to provide security for the ruling junta, including personal protection for the leader, Captain Ibrahim Traore. On August 6th, Ukraine launched the invasion into Russia's Kursk Oblast. They're saying that approximately 100 mercenaries from this group are leaving Burkina Faso 3 months after their arrival, officially to reinforce Russian defenses against the Ukrainian offensive in Kursk. Viktor Yermolayev, the commander of the group whose alias is Jedi, confirmed the withdrawal on August 22nd. Also, what a crazy alias. 5 days later, the brigade's Telegram channel announced their return to Crimea, citing recent developments with their base camp situated in Perevalne in occupied Crimea. While Yermolayev asserts that the Bears Brigade operates independently of the Russian Ministry of Defense, Le Monde notes that there are verified links with ministry officials. On April 5th, 2023, a Russian deputy minister of defense overseeing operations on the African continent personally visited their camp to show his support. A source in the West suggests that the departure of the brigade from Africa might also be related to an internal satisfaction issue over payment for some of the mercenaries, although Yermolayev, the Jedi guy, dismissed this as the cause, according to Le Monde. The group's presence in Burkina Faso is part of a broader Russian military and paramilitary deployment, which numbers between 200 and 300 personnel. So 100 of those have left, which was requested by Captain Traore following his attempted coup. Their duties include training soldiers and working with intelligence services. Ukrainian border guards report no significant movement or buildup of Belarusian military assets or personnel near the Ukrainian border, according to Colonel Andriy Demchenko, the spokesperson for Ukraine's State Border Guard Service. During a national newscast, Demchenko emphasized that Ukraine's defense forces maintained full control over the border from Volyn to Chernihiv and have not observed any unusual activities. Demchenko acknowledged that Belarus remains influenced by Russia, necessitating continued vigilance. He noted that while there is some movement of equipment and personnel that has been detected deeper within Belarusian territory, there is no significant military presence that has been observed near the border with Ukraine. He expressed hope that Belarus would refrain from actions that could destabilize the region, affirming Ukrainian forces are ready to respond if necessary. He also mentioned that Belarusian forces are stationed tens of kilometers away from the border, varying in distance depending on the area. Ukrainian intelligence and defense units are closely monitoring the situation, and the last item on that was the Belarusian Hagen project. Again, I highly recommend following them on Twitter. Reported that Belarusian troops near the Ukrainian border are around 1,100. These are the ones that are actually like on the border, which they don't believe poses a significant threat to Ukraine. Russia has reportedly relocated 90% of its aircraft to military bases beyond the reach of ATACMS missiles, aiming to reduce the risk of Ukrainian strikes, according to unnamed sources cited by the Wall Street Journal. This move comes as the U.S. continues to prohibit Ukraine from using ATACMS to target Russian military sites within Russia. Ukraine has expressed a strong desire to use these missiles to attack Russian airfields from which cruise missile attacks against Ukraine are launched. Despite Ukraine's repeated requests, Russian countries, including the US and the UK, have imposed restrictions on the use of long-range weapons like ATACMS and Storm Shadow missiles to prevent strikes deep within Russian territory, purportedly to avoid escalating the conflict. That's the language they always use, huh? Escalating the conflict. Ukraine's hydroelectric power company, Ukr there we go, has assured the public that there's no risk of the Kyiv dam breaking or causing flooding due to a recent missile strike by Russia. The CEO, Ihor Sirota, stated that there's no danger of the breach of the hydroelectric power plant and said that flooding is not currently a concern. He mentioned that while the full extent of the technical damage is still unknown due to ongoing debris clearance, the company is working to assess the impact and determine a time frame required for restoration. He emphasized that there were no injuries on the plant staff. Since the beginning of Russia's full-scale invasion, Ukr-Hydroenergo, there we go, I keep wanting to flip those, has lost over 40% of its electricity generation capacity, with its facilities being targeted around 130 times. The Kakhovka hydroelectric plant has been completely destroyed, and the Dnipro plant is currently non-operational. Other hydroelectric and pump storage plants are in various stages of repair. The recent missile strike on August 26, which targeted the Kyiv hydroelectric plant, was part of the largest attack on Ukraine since the invasion has begun. Despite this, the company reported that the plant did not suffer critical damage. Again, like they're still restoring power, but like the actual dam is not going to break. Operators of the Special Operations Forces of Ukraine successfully destroyed the Russian Sapphire electronic warfare system that was in Russia's Kursk region, or at least one of them. The SOF press service released a video showing the operation, which you're seeing, which targeted the EW station after it was identified during the reconnaissance of the Russian-controlled area. The attack was executed using drones, resulting in the destruction of the system and causing casualties among the crew, including both killed and wounded personnel. The Sapphire system, developed by the Russian Radio Electronic Technologies Concern, is designed to counter drones and protect critical infrastructure. It typically is mounted on a Mercedes-Benz Sprinter chassis, although it can be fitted to other platforms. The system is reported to detect drones from around 30 kilometers away and counter them within a 5-kilometer range. Despite claims by its manufacturer regarding its deployment in combat zones, there's no confirmed evidence of its effectiveness on systems. The incident follows another operation on August 20th, where Ukrainian forces used drones to target vehicles and equipment of a Russian pontoon bridge in the Kursk region. They've been doing that quite a bit. Among the damaged assets was a PP-91M vehicle with a PMP floating bridge and an EOV 3521 Army bucket excavator, which are all crucial for maintaining logistical routes after the destruction of 2 nearby bridges with Ukrainian airstrikes. A Russian Su-25 attack aircraft was downed by the Air Defense Unit of the 28th Mechanized Brigade in Ukraine. The brigade's press service confirmed the incident and released a video which shows the 2 planes in flight. One of the aircraft, after deploying heat traps, descends and disappears into the tree line, while the camera continues to track the second plane. The video was recorded on August 28th and includes footage of smoke rising from the area where the Su-25 was last seen, suggesting a location of a crash. There's speculation that just before the crash, the aircraft's cockpit canopy cartridge, which is activated before pilot ejection, may have been triggered. Russian military blogger Ilya Tumanov published a video related to a similar incident involving an Su-25, although he denies the downing of the aircraft, claiming it was a maneuver. However, the claim is questionable given the aircraft's rapid descent so close to the ground. The downing of the Su-25 was acknowledged by the Ukrainian Armed Forces General Staff report on Russian losses, which is regularly updated. And the incident is the latest in a series of events with similar occurrences in July when the 110th Mechanized Brigade shot down an Su-25 during an attack in Donetsk. Around 33 of the aircraft have been confirmed lost during the full-scale invasion, although the actual number is likely higher. These are the only ones that open source intelligence has confirmed lost. An oil depot near the village of Molodezhny in Russia's Rostov region caught fire following a drone strike, according to reports from Baza. The incident occurred around 3 a.m. On August 28th, and when two drones struck the facility. The Telegram channel MASH also reported on the attack, noting the timing of the incident. The governor of the Rostov region, Vasily Golubev, confirmed that 4 drones were shot down during the incident. However, local sources on social media indicated that several fuel tanks had caught fire, resulting in a significant blaze. As of the morning, the fire had not been extinguished. Again, this is footage from that specific attack. This fire shows another ongoing blaze at an oil, or this fire follows an ongoing blaze at the Proletarsk facility, which we covered last week, which was an absolutely massive fire and was also attributed to strikes on diesel fuel tanks. They used a fire train in that one, and the fire in Proletarsk, apparently, according to a report from at least a few days ago, it's not been fully contained, and the affected area continues to expand. Okay, so next topic is economy and industry stuff. On August 30th, the defense ministers of European Union countries agreed to expand the training of Ukrainian military personnel under the EU military assistance mission for Ukraine. This was confirmed by Joseph Borrell, the chief diplomat of the EU. UMAM, that's what I'm going to call it, EUMAM, launched in October 2022 and focuses on improving the capabilities of the Ukrainian military. So far, around 60,000 troops have received training from the program, mainly in Germany and Poland. The ministers have set a new goal to increase that number to 75,000 by training an additional 15,000 by the end of the year. The training will be tailored to the current battlefield conditions and carried out in coordination with Ukraine. A coordination center will be established in Kyiv. Borrell praised the initiative as one of the, or as the EU's most successful training mission for a foreign country to date. On August 27th, they reported that the EU is considering specific operational conditions in which they might send instructors to Ukraine. The report highlights that Ukraine has requested training within its borders due to logistical and financial reasons. However, some EU member states are concerned that conducting training in Ukraine could increase tensions with Russia. So we have a couple of U.S. Stories this week. The U.S. Army has placed an order for Javelin missiles valued at $1.3 billion, marking the largest single-year production contract for Javelins. According to the joint venture RTX, which includes manufacturers Lockheed Martin and Raytheon, more than 4,000 of these missiles are intended for Ukraine to help replenish its stocks. Javelin missiles are a key component of Ukraine's defense strategy, particularly against Russian armored vehicles, as they have proven effective in hampering Russia's offensive capabilities. This order is part of a broader contract signed in May 2023, which covers Javelin missile production and related services. The contract could potentially total $7.2 billion over multiple years from 2023 to 2026 and includes the production of an unspecified number of missiles. The manufacturer plans to increase annual production to around about 4,000 by the end of 2026. The joint venture noted that the contract also involves the procurement of Javelin weapon systems for the U.S. Army, and the companies behind the Javelin have produced around 50,000 missiles and more than 12,000 reusable command launch units for 25 international customers. They've been a consistent part of U.S. military aid to Ukraine, with the latest package announced on August 23rd, including 10,000 of these anti-armor systems. Also, during a visit to the United States, this is all kind of one big story I put together. Also, during a visit to the United States, Yulia Svyrdenko, Ukraine's first deputy prime minister, announced an $800 million aid package from the U.S. aimed at rebuilding Ukraine's energy sector. She expressed gratitude for the support, highlighting that the funds would be used for conducting passive protection systems and addressing immediate repair needs. She mentioned that during the visit, a list of essential equipment required for the repairs were compiled by Ukraine's cabinet of ministers and was provided to U.S. officials. In her discussions with David Turk, the U.S. Secretary of Energy, the focus was on efforts to restore the energy infrastructure. And according to the Economy Ministry, the $800 million will be part of broader financial commitments made at the Ukraine Recovery Conference in Berlin, which are currently being allocated. And the last U.S. item, in April, General Dynamics Ordnance and Tactical Systems, Northeastern Pennsylvania, which consists of the Scranton Army Ammunition Plant and the sister plant in Wilkes-Barre, increased their production of 155 millimeter shell bodies by 50%, from 24,000 to 36,000 per month. According to a new report from the Associated Press, the Scranton plant still has 3 new production lines under development, which will boost capacity even further. The completed shell bodies are sent to facilities in Iowa, Kansas, and Arkansas to be loaded with explosives, assembled and packed, and then they can be shipped to Ukraine. The U.S. government has stated that since the start of the full-scale invasion, the United States has supplied Ukraine with over 3 million 155 millimeter artillery shells. Lithuania has delivered a shipment of military aid to Ukraine, which includes loaders, anti-drone systems, folding beds, and various other types of equipment. The aid arrived to Ukraine on August 28th, according to their defense ministry. In response to requests from Ukraine earlier this year, they provided a range of military support, including 155 millimeter ammunition, M577 and M113 armored vehicles, anti-drone systems, winter clothing, ammunition for the Carl Gustaf anti-tank grenade launcher, Rise 1 remote detonation systems, generators, disassembled parts of light attack aircraft, trailers, and additional auxiliary equipment. Since 2022, Lithuania has contributed around 647 million euros in military aid to Ukraine and around $1 billion in total aid. On August 31st, the Dutch Defense Minister Ruben Brekelmans announced that the Netherlands will provide Ukraine with 28 Viking Bondwagen S-10 amphibious armored vehicles. These are made in Sweden, and that is what they call their amphibious troop transport, the Viking Bondwagen. Erlend, absolutely incredible.
Bandvagn.
I'm not going to try. Ukrainian soldiers have already received training on these vehicles from the Dutch Marine Corps, according to their defense minister. The Viking, I'm not going to say it, weighing approximately 11 tons, is designed to operate on various surfaces, including water, thanks to its rubber tracks. Look at this little guy. Isn't he cool? Just look at that. Did they show it come out in the video already?
There.
Look at him go.
So I wouldn't say that it's I would call it wading or maybe swimming. It's not really very good. Yeah, it's not fantastically fast in water, but it works.
A modern day Viking longboat, Erlend. Just look at it.
But yeah, it's not that hard. Bandwagen. Come on, try it.
Bondwagen.
Yeah, that's good enough.
Yeah.
Quite good.
Yeah. Okay, moving on. Energoatom, Ukraine's state-owned nuclear company, is advancing plans to complete the unfinished Chehirin nuclear power plant. If you read the Latinized version of that name, it's 3 Ys, Chehirin, but it's just Chehirin. It's not a big deal. Near the town of Orbita in Cherkasy Oblast. The company has identified the site as a key location for expanding Ukraine's nuclear energy capabilities, with plans to construct 4 new power units using AP1000 technology. This was basically planned in January. But this week, as a first step, the Chehirin City Council, during an extraordinary meeting, approved the development of a land management project and granted the company permanent use of land plots totaling approximately 38 hectares. The company intends to revitalize Orbita, aiming to transform it into a modern town similar to Netyshin or Yuzhno-Ukrainsk or Varash, towns that developed around other Ukrainian nuclear power plants. According to Petro Kotin, the head of Energoatom, the project is seen as a major investment in Ukraine's post-war reconstruction effort and critical contributions to the nation's energy security long-term. By applying innovative nuclear technologies, Ukraine aims to position itself as a leader in the nuclear energy sector and wants to develop unique expertise and technological solutions to export to other countries. And also related to power on the economy, this is like the same story. Strict energy consumption regulations were stated to be lasting for probably 1 or 2 weeks until the distribution systems are fully repaired as a result of the massive attack last week. And they mentioned that it's not a temporary measure. It could extend, assuming there's no large-scale attacks, like in between, about 1 to 2 weeks. And this was the most significant attack on the energy infrastructure that has ever occurred on August 26th, that major attack. And he just said, like, thank you to the workers who prevented a complete shutdown of the power grid, because it was like a really difficult time for the grid. So, yeah. Next item. The World Bank's Board of Executive Directors has approved a new project for Ukraine titled Lifting Education Access and Resilience in Times of Need, or LEARN. I don't understand how the T gets removed from that acronym when they're trying so hard to be clever with it. But anyway, with a total budget of $415 million, this initiative is focused on enhancing primary and secondary education across the country and is expected to benefit around 1 million students in Ukraine, teachers, and school staff. So as much as I'd like them to improve the acronym, they're doing a great job. According to a press release from the World Bank, Bob Saum, the World Bank country director for Eastern Europe, emphasized the importance of mitigating the war's impact on children, particularly the most vulnerable, by ensuring continuity in their education. The LEARN project encompasses several key measures, including improving safety conditions in schools, offering free transport for vulnerable students, training teachers, purchasing textbooks, and enhancing management within the education sector. The project supports the implementation of the new Ukrainian school reform, which aligns Ukrainian system better with the European Union standards for grades 1 through 12. Ukrainian Finance Minister Serhiy Marchenko highlighted that the LEARN project would enable thousands of Ukrainian students to learn in safer environments. And the agreement is expected to be signed in September. If predefined goals are met by the end of 2024, Ukraine could receive about $200 million in additional funding for its budget's general fund. The Ministry of Finance is responsible for overseeing and coordinating the project, and the Ministry of Education and Science will serve as the implementation agency, managing the execution, monitoring, and evaluation of the project. Russian companies have been facing a significant decline in profits since the summer of 2024, according to data from Rosstat, Russia's Federal State Statistics Service, and this is reported by the Moscow Times. As of June 2024, the overall financial result, calculated as profits minus losses, dropped fourfold year over year, amounting to approximately $9.3 million US dollars. This marks a sharp decline from June 2023, when the figure stood at 9.3 billion US dollars versus 35.5 billion US dollars. In other words, they dropped from 35 billion to 9 billion, meaning that companies lost over 26 billion in profits within a year. When comparing June 2024 to May, the balanced profit for the economy decreased by 3.4 times. The primary cause of the downturn is attributed to the coal industry, which has been severely impacted by the loss of export markets. In the first half of 2024, they reported a loss of $77 million, and that's in contrast to a $3 billion profit that was recorded in the previous year. Steel producers saw a 9% reduction in profits, and car dealerships also saw a decline. Oil refineries saw a decline. So a lot of key industries in Russia, which doesn't have a ton of industries, have seen major declines. The profitability of Russian businesses has been eroding as the country's economy slows down and the banking system encounters increasing challenges with cross-border payments. Industrial output in Russia has declined about 0.8% in June of 2024 compared to the same month in the previous year, and 1.5% compared to May. Ukraine's Ministry of Defense has announced plans to significantly broaden its meal ready-to-eat ration options to address the diverse religious, medical, and ethical needs of its service members. Beginning in December 2024, the military will introduce vegetarian, kosher, and halal meal options as part of this initiative. Let's get it out on the tray. If Steve content IDs us, it's gonna break my heart, Erlend. The goal of the expansion is to ensure that all servicemen and servicewomen, regardless of dietary requirements, have access to appropriate nutrition. The Deputy Defense Minister highlighted the importance of the initiative, emphasizing the need to accommodate the diverse beliefs, health concerns, and ethical principles of their defenders, fostering supportive and inclusive environment. In preparation, working with the procurement agency State Logistics Operator, or DOT, they've engaged with consultations of various religious communities, including the Orthodox Church of Ukraine, the Greek Catholic Church, and Islamic and Jewish communities, as well as animal rights organizations such as Kozna Tvarnya and UA Animals. Good follow on Twitter, by the way. Also participated in the discussions. Halia Litosh, the Director of Project Portfolio Management at DOT, underscored that this alignment will move them closer to Euro-Atlantic standards for MREs. And this it was agreed that they'll do more consultations in the future to make MREs more acceptable to like these different groups of like religious communities and civil society organizations. And this initiative follows a petition to the president, which garnered 25,000 signatures calling for the development of vegetarian MREs for the Ukrainian army. And the introduction of NATO-type MRE rations started in 2015 and was one of the early military reforms that Ukraine adopted to modernize their armed forces. So next topic this week is international relations. I think those were like the two longest topics this week, the last two. This is kind of a big one. In 2023, former Colombian military officer Jose Aron Medina and his compatriot Alexander Ante joined the Ukrainian armed forces to fight against Russia, as noted by El Tiempo. After their time in Ukraine, Medina and Ante decided to return to Colombia, having encountered severe challenges, including witnessing numerous fatalities in their unit. While traveling back to Colombia, Medina and Ante disappeared at Caracas Airport in Venezuela. Their disappearance has raised alarms, especially since Venezuela is an ally of Russia, leading to concerns that they could be handed over to Russian authorities. According to the defense news outlet Tochnyi, Russia's FSB announced the detention of 2 Colombian citizens who had allegedly participated in the war on Ukraine's side. One detainee's sister mentioned that they drew the attention of Venezuelan police due to wearing Ukrainian military uniforms. The FSB opened a criminal case for mercenarism against the detained Colombians, which could result in up to 15 years of imprisonment in Russia. The FSB did not clarify the specifics of their detention. Following the onset of Russia's large-scale invasion in February 2022, Ukraine established the International Legion and invited foreign nationals to join. Volunteers of over 50 countries are currently part of the Legion. It's not clear to me if these guys were international legions. I assume they were, though. Ukraine ended a secure direct telephone line with Moscow that had been operational since late 1990, signaling another move to, or the late 1990s, signaling another move to cut ties with Russia. The line, which was established in 1998 on February 27th under an agreement between Ukraine's cabinet of ministers and the Russian government, was terminated after 10 years of the war and 2.5 years following the full-scale invasion. On August 30th, the permanent representative of the cabinet of ministers announced that the government had officially ended the agreement and the secure line had been cut. Also, a Ukrainian delegation led by the first deputy prime minister and minister of the economy has commenced a visit to Washington, with the first meeting taking place with the U.S. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin. I already mentioned a little bit about the funding they're going to get for the energy sector there. But they also met with key defense officials. So Andriy Yermak, the head of the Office of President, Rustem Umerov, the Minister of Defense, and Oleksandr Balanutsa, the Deputy Minister of Defense, a bunch of people, general staff, logistics departments, etc. During the meeting, Yermak expressed gratitude to the President and the U.S. Congress, as well as the American people. And he, along with Umerov, provided updates to the U.S. officials on the battlefield situation and emphasized Ukraine's need for additional weapons and equipment, as well as the attacks on energy infrastructure. He mentioned the large attacks by Russian missiles that had been occurring in the past week, and he acknowledged the significant roles in the Ukraine Defense Contact Group, which is something that the U.S. set up to help coordinate military aid to Ukraine. And the U.S. like last week announced another $125 million package. But again, I announced that last week. Ukraine has decided not to renew an agreement with Russia regarding the transit of Russian gas through Ukrainian territory once it expires at the end of 2024. However, Ukraine is open to discussing the transit of gas with other suppliers if requested by European partners. This was confirmed by the president during a press conference on August 27th. Zelensky made it clear that the agreement with Russia would not be extended. However, he indicated, I mentioned that, regarding recent developments, he had no new information about a meeting between Russian and Azerbaijani leaders, dismissing speculation that gas is the primary topic of their discussion and suggesting that other issues were likely on the agenda. And like the reason we mentioned that is because the president of Azerbaijan stated in July that Azerbaijan and Russia were negotiating the continuation of gas transit through Ukraine, like using Azerbaijan as an intermediary. And Aliyev claimed that both Ukrainian authorities and the European Union had asked Azerbaijan to help facilitate an extension of the contract. But as far as I can tell, here Zelensky is mentioning that that's not true. Like he's just making that up. But I could be misunderstanding that. The CEO of Naftogaz, Ukraine's largest oil and gas company, commented that they're exploring alternatives to ensure stable gas supplies to Europe after the termination of the transit contracts with Russia. One possibility is the possibility of using Azerbaijani gas. In early August, Ukraine's energy minister, Herman Halashenko, mentioned that no formal proposals had been received from Azerbaijan, but he acknowledges that such proposals might still be forthcoming. So again, yeah, I think from what I can tell, they're saying that Azerbaijan hasn't approached them yet, but it's definitely a possibility that Ukraine is considering. The recent dismissal of Air Force Commander Mykola Oleschuk was unrelated to the fatal crash of an F-16 fighter jet earlier this week that occurred, according to the Defense Minister Rustem Umerov in an interview with CNN that was published on August 30th. Oleschuk's removal came shortly after the Ukrainian military confirmed the crash of an F-16 fighter jet on August 26, which had been recently delivered. The jet was being piloted by one of Ukraine's top aviators, Oleksiy Mes, also known by the call sign Moonfish, who was killed in the incident while defending against the large Russian drone attack that I mentioned a few times. The official reason for the dismissal of the commander of the Air Force was not disclosed in the announcement from the presidential office, but Umerov in this interview referred to the dismissal as a, quote, rotation, and emphasized that it was a separate matter from the crash, stating that at this stage I wouldn't connect them. Umerov described the crash and the loss of Moonfish as unfortunate and confirmed that an investigation is underway. He noted that the investigation has been open to Ukraine's international partners who are collaborating in the analysis of the incident. Ukraine's defense ministry has formed a special commission to investigate the causes of the crash. Oleschuk mentioned that Ukraine has received a preliminary report from the U.S., which is now part of the ongoing investigation. However, Pentagon spokesperson Sabrina Singh stated on August 29th that she was, quote, not aware of any assistance or requests from the Ukrainian side regarding the incident and declined to provide further details, directing such inquiries to Ukrainian officials. So it's not clear if she just didn't know about this or if that's like an official statement from the Pentagon about that they didn't do this. I would guess that because she's deferring to Ukrainian officials that we can assume it happened. But anyway, an unnamed U.S. defense official informed Reuters that the crash, quote, did not appear to be the result of a Russian fire. Also, a bunch of U.S. officials go off the record and are saying a lot of stuff about this crash. Some of it is a little bit contradictory. So, I've tried to keep it to the facts. But anyway, an unnamed U.S. official informed Reuters that the crash did not appear to be the result of Russian fire. And that seems to be consistent. No one's saying that the Russians shot it down, suggesting other potential causes, including possibly pilot error or mechanical failure. Those seem to be the two leading theories. Additionally, the Wall Street Journal reported on August 31st that the White House had rejected a proposal from the U.S. military to send civilian contractors to Ukraine to maintain F-16s and other equipment. The U.S. intelligence community considered the plan too risky and stated that, again, like when they were helping the president make the decision, they stated concerns that the possibility of Russia would target American contractors as like a reason. So final couple items this week is like Russia news. The Kremlin has decided not to cancel the upcoming elections in the Kursk border region, despite the ongoing Ukrainian offensive, and I would also say the state of emergency they declared there. Russian officials involved in election preparations have labeled the situation as a, quote, local crisis from a military standpoint, downplaying the severity of the invasion. The elections, scheduled for September 8th, will proceed in regions regularly targeted by Ukrainian shelling, including Kursk, Bryansk, Crimea, and Sevastopol, with additional measures in place to ensure safety, such as the provision of protective gear for election officials. On August 26th, the Ukrainian incursion into the Kursk region displaced 130,000 Russians and left many residents in Ukrainian-controlled areas, and it's posed significant challenges for the Russian government. There were initial considerations to postpone the elections altogether, but the Kremlin ultimately decided to proceed, framing it as a demonstration of resilience against Ukraine. To accommodate the ongoing crisis, the Central Election Commission extended the voting period in the gubernatorial election, allowing residents to vote for Putin's handpicked crony online or in person over an extended time frame. Isn't that nice? You've been your land's been occupied. You're a refugee in Russia of all places, where you're treated like dirt, and they're telling you still need to go vote for the local local collaborator with the Kremlin, and they've very nicely given you some extra days to do that. The Kremlin remains committed to holding the elections as scheduled, And the decision, and they basically all the local officials went on social media and said, like, this is important, like, to demonstrate we're not afraid and all that. The decision to maintain the election schedule poses risk to civilians, and it's part of the Kremlin's broader strategy of projecting control and legitimacy, even in the face of these significant challenges posed by, the threats to their security that has resulted from the invasion. In other words, they're trying to look tough and like this is like no big deal and everything's normal, right? Russian forces have intensified efforts to locate deserters and increase the number of checkpoints in the temporarily occupied Ukrainian territories, according to the National Resistance Center of Ukraine. After being captured, deserters are typically forced back to the front lines under harsh wartime laws, and I imagine they're put in units that are not the best. The Russian military command has reportedly refused to allow its personnel to ever leave the front lines, even after their contracts have ended. Local reports from occupied territories indicate that many deserter soldiers are the ones whose contracts were not honored or who were slated for high casualty assaults, often referred to as meat grinder assaults, indicating a disregard for the soldiers' well-being by military leadership. Also, kind of in similar news, in response so this is in the occupied territories that they're looking for deserters. But in response to Ukraine's advance into Kursk Oblast, among reports of widespread looting by Russian forces, Russian authorities have established an armed volunteer group called Bars Kursk to maintain order in evacuated areas, citing the governor announcing that the group will be responsible for ensuring security in 8 evacuated districts and other regions within the oblast. Following Ukraine's entry, we all know that Ukraine did that. The government stated that they will receive training and weapons and will work closely with military and security forces for the counterterrorism operation. And they will assist in helping support like the people in evacuated areas and aiding remaining residents in like the war zone, I guess. So yeah, Russia's making a lot more new paramilitary organizations, I would say, is kind of the gist there. And my last item this week, yet another. I try to give you guys every single one of these that happen, just because I like the pattern. I don't know. An Mi-8T helicopter operated by Vityaz Aero disappeared on Russia's Kamchatka Peninsula after departing from the vicinity of Vakchazhets volcano, as reported by the Russian state media on August 31st. The helicopter was carrying 22 individuals, including 19 passengers and 3 crew members. For some crazy reason, I should just mention really quick, I don't know if this happened. From what I can tell, the way this all evolved is like some people randomly speculated, I assume on Telegram originally, that like Putin and Lavrov and like Peskov were all on this helicopter. Like there's absolutely no reason to assume that. And we know like it looks like people were touring a volcano. It was like tourism or something. Anyways, but there was like this major rumor on Twitter that like Lavrov is dead somehow, and that like I heard this helicopter mentioned, and I don't understand why, because it's definitely not. So just wanted to shout out that like this Lavrov thing is probably not a substantiated rumor, and this helicopter thing is definitely not any kind of confirmation of that. The aircraft lost contact at approximately 7:15 a.m. Moscow time, and it took after a site near the volcano, traveling near the village of Nikolaevka. Despite the lack of radio contact, search efforts were promptly initiated. Another airline sent out a search helicopter and additional Mi-8 helicopters, and ground rescue teams were prepared to assist. The Russian Emergency Situations Ministry also dispatched another Mi-8 helicopter equipped with rescuers to aid in the search operation. That sounds like a good way to lose more Mi-8 helicopters, guys. Meanwhile, the Russian Investigative Committee opened an investigation into violations of air traffic safety regulations that may have caused the incident. And yeah, I just part of a broader pattern. It looks like the sanctions on Russia's aviation industry have hit the Mi-8 helicopter pretty hard in particular, in addition to kind of some maybe design limitations involving the ejection seat and stuff. I don't know. I report on one of these things crashing like every week. Usually the crew dies. Like it's very difficult for them to eject from this thing. So that pretty much closes out my news for this week. I just wanted to real quick touch base with Colby because there was a report from the Associated Press this week about the Scranton ammunition plant, and it wasn't super. It was framed a little bit weird, and I know Colby has like reached out to the people who wrote the article for a little bit more clarification, and we haven't heard back yet. But I just wanted to like give Colby an opportunity, just because he has been following U.S. production of artillery shells so closely, and because I think that the story is maybe a little bit bigger than what the Associated Press gave, and I think that they sort of got some of their facts wrong. I just like, I don't know how else to say it. Like, the story itself isn't framed well and doesn't seem super accurate. So I thought I'd give Colby like an opportunity to maybe explain the situation a little better. So Colby, like, everybody's talking about this story that the AP released. You know how it goes. Like, the AP released a story, and then like every other major news agency released a story that the AP released a story, right? So it was sort of a big talking point this week that like they've increased the production 50%, and that, you know, this, I don't know, that this is like big news and stuff. So it does seem like there is some news, but I just wanted to ask for like some more clarification on that.
Sure. So I mean, the main thing is that, you know, the AP is releasing this story now, end of August, that, oh, there's been this 50% increase at Scranton, and they went from 24,000 to 36,000. But that happened in April, and it wasn't just Scranton. It's General Dynamics Northeastern Pennsylvania. So there's multiple plants here. So there's a Scranton plant, which is a government-owned plant that General Dynamics runs on their behalf. It's a government-owned contractor-operated facility. And then General Dynamics has their own privately owned facility as well in a nearby Wilkes-Barre. And when they got to 36, that was actually because of a increase at the Wilkes-Barre plant. It wasn't at the Scranton plant. The Scranton plant has increased production as well. Both of those plants have increased production. But when they got to 36, which again happened in April, I believe it was another 6,000 rounds came online because a new production line had just been completed at the Wilkes-Barre plant. So it had gone from 30 to 36 back in April. So it's not just Scranton. And again, this is not a new increase. The United States has been producing 36,000 rounds per month since then in April. So that wasn't really made clear by the article or mentioned at all, that this, you know, it said quote unquote recently, which to me, we're at the end of August now, in September. Recently is not, you know, this happened back in April. So that wasn't a new development. The interesting thing was that they said, they said that the manager at Scranton told them that Scranton still has 3 new production lines that are still in development and are yet to come. And as I said, both plants have been increasing production. We've known that there have been a number of modernization projects at Scranton. There's been reference to several lines. I think that Scranton, going from memory from some old information, I think Scranton had plans for 5. So that would suggest that there are now 2 new lines that have been completed, and there are 3 more to come. Don't quote me on that, but I think that's kind of where we stand. So that's an interesting, if that's accurate, that's definitely a notable update, just to have confirmation of how many lines they have completed so far, how many are yet to come. And we know, and thank you for putting up the chart here that I shared. I mean, the real big news, not the AP article, but the real news is that Assistant Secretary of the Army Bush disclosed recently, and this was actually an interview from a while ago as well, but it was only just published very recently, last week. He said that they are actually ahead of schedule, and that they're going to hit 80,000 shells per month sometime this fall. And so that's 10,000 more than they were expecting. They expected to get to 70,000. You can see the green line. So they expected to be at 70,000 shells per month by this fall. And now they're expecting to be at 80,000. So it's at 36 right now. You can see that 57,000 per month by fourth quarter of the fiscal year, which is now. Quarter ends at the end of September. So I would say imminently we're expecting to get somewhere in that ballpark, 55, 56, 57,000 rounds per month, because there are 2 lines that are coming up in Texas that should be finished commissioning. Perhaps one of them may even be already producing, but at least 2 of the 3, there's 3 lines in the new Texas plant, Mesquite, each have a capacity of 10,000 rounds per month for 30,000. So 2 of those lines are due to come online very soon. Then there'll be the 3rd that would get them up to 66,000 a month with the 3rd line. So for them to get to 80,000 a month, you still have 14,000 more shells. So that already sort of indicates that there had to be an additional expansion of production at Scranton or Wilkes-Barre. So it seems like some of those lines should also be completed soon in order for them to meet that 80,000 a month target. So putting all this is putting all the pieces of the puzzle together, which is what you have to do to figure out all this stuff. That seems to be sort of the state of play right now, that there's almost certainly there are more lines coming online in the future. And at Scranton, AP was told 3. I've reached out to the author of that piece because I wanted to find out if they were able to elaborate any further on that as to what the capacity of each of those lines would be and when they would come online. Again, we can infer that it's going to be this fall, at least 1, perhaps more of those lines, depending on how much capacity they will come online this fall. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to hit the target. So hopefully that kind of a lot of data there, but hopefully that explains it for the audience adequately where we stand right now with the 155 production.
Yeah, thanks, Colby. I think too, I think you could explain the numbers very clearly, but I guess maybe in a more subjective sense, it sounds like, because like I said, you followed this for a long time. It sounds like you're pretty satisfied / optimistic about the U.S.'s artillery production situation. Would you say so? 100,000 a month, 80,000 a month, you would consider a lot or an acceptable amount? For people who don't understand what the numbers might actually mean, would you say subjectively it's a good, we're in good shape, or no?
Well, for context, before the war started, the United States had facilitization for 13 or 14,000 shells a month to be load assembled and packed at Iowa. I don't know what General Dynamics their facilitization for the shell bodies was at the time, but the actual production was below that, if I recall correctly. There's been a few different numbers thrown around, but I think it may have actually been under 10,000 shells a month that were actually getting built before the war. They had facilitization for a little bit more, but it was a very minor amount. So the United States has, it's taken a while. It's been 2.5 years, but they have increased production quite substantially. So it's you can't say that nothing's happened, because they have actually, it's relative to what the baseline was, there's been quite a substantial increase in production. Is it adequate? Given Ukrainian demands for ammunition, what they say that they would be capable of firing if it was delivered to them, obviously it's not even close to what Ukraine really needs. It's still fairly short of that. Obviously, it's still a drop in the bucket compared to what the United States used to be able to do. I mean, during the 80s, the United States had capacity for over 1 million shells every month. And the goal right now is just to get to 100,000 shells per month, right? So 10% of what the United States could do during the final decade of the Cold War. So if you make that comparison, it's a pretty trivial amount. So fundamentally, it's a question of what are the requirements, and in my view, yeah, it should be higher, but the money just isn't there. Production capacity doesn't just magically appear out of nowhere. It has to be paid for. It has to be built. It does take time. There is very high levels of demand for all of the machine tooling, the forges that you need to build the ammunition. Everybody around the planet right now is trying to get their hands on the equipment they need, the raw materials as well to build ammunition. So it's a tough market. It's not something that's easy that can be done overnight. It should be more, but the money wasn't there. The Biden administration, the Army, they I don't know what the Army's actual advice to the Pentagon and to the White House was about where they think the number should be, but the number that was approved by leadership was 100,000. That was the target they set. They feel that is adequate. And again, there's no shortage of people saying it's peanuts. It needs to be more. It's like, well, I mean, this is what people voted for in effect. If people think it should be higher, more money needs to be put into it. And right now, there does not seem to be any desire on the part of leadership to go more than that. And in fact, there has been talk about, what does a ramp down look like? Which is that's a red flag to me that they're even talking about that right now. It's obviously something that has to be considered. But the fact that they're even talking about what a ramp down would look like when they're still actively ramping up, and really they probably should be ramping up to more, it is a little bit troubling. So it's a mixed bag. Like, yes, it's a lot higher than it used to be, but it's still not where it probably should be. And the open question as well is, it's not just the United States. Obviously, Europe is producing as well, but for most of Europe, we don't really know what they're producing because they're not public about any of this the same way that the United States is. We have good numbers on Rheinmetall, and I will be sharing some updated figures. And
real quick, you're kind of skipping my last question here. It's basically like, how would you compare that to Europe? So I think you're kind of leading into that now. So just go ahead.
Yeah. So I mean, so Rheinmetall, I'll be sharing updated figures on that on Tuesday or Wednesday, so people can stay tuned to that. The numbers we basically knew them already, but Rheinmetall has made it explicitly clear. It's published, it's official. So the things that they've just been talking about, there's a lot more certainty in that now. So I'll share those updated figures from Rheinmetall. The United States is by the end of this year will be above Rheinmetall and will continue to lead Rheinmetall in production for the foreseeable future. So, but that's just one company, and Rheinmetall is global, and some of the production is in places like South Africa, which is obviously not particularly useful to Ukraine, because even there recently people may have saw that they were not willing to even sell to Poland because they weren't trusting that Poland would abide by the end user license for that ammunition. So that's just Rheinmetall. There's a lot of other companies and countries around the world that are producing ammunition as well, but it's hard to get a good, accurate picture because, again, just most companies or at the state level, they're just not allowing that information to get out there. So we can say that collectively, if we just look at NATO alone, we are producing a lot more than people think, but it is very difficult to get an accurate assessment of what it looks like. And obviously, the biggest indicator is what is Ukraine receiving? And we constantly hear from the Ukrainians, we don't have enough ammunition. So there's obviously still a disconnect there. So we need to be doing better on production. We need to be doing better on ensuring that the ammunition we do produce actually ends up in Ukraine, because it's obvious that a lot of it doesn't. There's been a lot of reporting that a lot of Europe's production is still fulfilling third-party contracts with other countries around the world other than Ukraine, and a lot of the ammunition they're producing is going back into their own national stockpiles because those were depleted very quickly by sending ammunition to Ukraine, and now they're refilling their own stockpiles, which is poor prioritization to say the least. Because obviously, so long as Ukraine is fighting, Europe doesn't have to worry itself about needing to go to war with Russia. So I think it's not wise for them to prioritize their own national stockpiles rather than delivering that ammunition to Ukraine. Because even in the unthinkable scenario in which Ukraine starts losing quite badly, they would still have time to refill their national stockpiles and prepare for an eventual war with Russia, which is what we're obviously trying to avoid. So there's more work to be done is the bottom line.
Yeah, absolutely. Erlend, did you have any questions or comments about this topic before we move on?
Not really. Yeah, as Colby mentioned, I mean, Europe is doing something when it comes to artillery shells, and there's definitely been lots of investments in many different countries, but the real numbers of output especially are kind of obscured. And I know that, yes, so the only comment I have, yes, Rheinmetall definitely gives a lot more transparency, but I think there are I'm not sure if the numbers that they give out are necessarily reflecting the actual produced shells by their factories. As far as I know, they have also, because of difficulties meeting the orders, they have acquired shells from other producers in Europe. So I'm not sure if that can be completely interpreted into production from Rheinmetall. I don't know if Colby has anything to say on that.
I have been told that because there was some indication that they didn't even have enough orders, but I have heard that they are pretty much fully booked far into the future. I think that's the case for most European producers, that they do have a lot of orders. More orders are always a good thing, especially if they're long term and there's some predictability there. But for a lot of producers, all the information that I've come across is that for the most part, the books are pretty full. We had the Slovakian government, for example, said that their order books for the companies in Slovakia, MSM Group, their order books are pretty much entirely filled with orders for Ukraine, and far into the future as well, not just existing production or this year's production. So I think that's there may be cases where some companies are not getting the orders they would like, but I think for a lot of them the orders are there. I think it's just there are definitely huge backlogs because production in Europe was quite low, so they're struggling to just get the production levels up and deliver what they've been contracted for.
Yeah, I think the European numbers can be a bit overwhelming. I think the best way I've tried to process it in my brain is it seems like the U.S. has resolved about 1.2 million shells a year to Ukraine is adequate. As you said, that's definitely a subjective thing that the U.S. has decided. Ukraine could probably do with more, but that's what the U.S. has set as a baseline. It seems like Europe has also set that as a baseline, about 1 million shells. They did that initiative, and they sort of failed to meet that, last year. But I think it seems like probably we're on track for Europe to at least meet that goal. And then in part, I think it was maybe salvaged a bit by this Czech initiative to purchase recovered ammunition, right? But I mean, do you think that's maybe a good way to frame it, Colby, this million shell thing, and kind of looking at Europe more collectively?
Yeah, it's I don't know. It's a mess, honestly. I mean, with Europe, one of the big frustrations is just the EU is just very unclear about what's really going on. Everybody's kind of got a different number. They said that they're doing 1 million large caliber shells, and it was unclear whether that was just 155 or it was also 152 on top of that, or whether 122 even would be included in that. I think that Europe is definitely doing at least over 1 million right now. I mean, they've said that, but I think that that's probably true. But it's really unknowable. And I've said this before, even the US government does not know what Europe is actually producing. They just, the Europeans, I think they don't even tell each other. Basically, it's companies and and different governments over there are so secretive that they are not even willing to communicate to their peers, to EU officials, what they are doing. I don't think any of them really understand what the other guy is able to do. So it's very hard to get a very accurate picture. But I think that at least 1 million is probably sort of at this point, a safe floor for what they're doing. Obviously, the United States will be doing just under 1 million now by the end of the year, or by this fall. So collectively, there's going to be, that's 2 million rounds between everybody, which is good. But again, like, how much of that actually ends up in Ukraine? Because not all of America's production is going to Ukraine either. Like the U.S. is definitely, they're refilling their own stocks as well, and they do have an obligation to refill war reserve Israel as well. And it's unclear how much ammunition has actually been transferred over there, because Ukraine got 300,000 shells out of WRSAI, and that was done with the understanding that the United States was going to replenish that eventually, and especially if there was a war in the Middle East, which is obviously happening now. So the United States has obligations besides just sending ammunition to Ukraine that they have to take into account. So Ukraine is not going to get 100% of what we're producing. So the two issues there are just like, production continues to be insufficient, needs to rise a lot higher. And then we have to do a better job of ensuring that whatever we do produce, as much as is physically possible, realistically possible, that gets delivered to Ukraine as soon as possible.
I just also want to add that the Norwegian government, after 2 years, decided that we will establish a production line of 155 shells in Ukraine. And basically, as far as I understand, it will be a copy-paste of the production line at Nammo in Norway. And I mean, it took 2 years for them to decide this. And I'm speechless. I'm like, yeah, it's good that it finally happened, but we're probably not going to see any results at all from this for the next year. So yeah, it's the decision-making process has just been ridiculous.
Yeah, so I think that's pretty much like the best we can do for an update on that stuff. I know it's like really complicated. There's a lot of numbers. There's a lot of technical information about how this stuff gets made, and like, it's not, none of it's simple, right? But I think we did our best to, like, I think Colby did a good job explaining, with all those numerical comparisons, like what the numbers kind of mean in perspective, and hopefully people got a little bit of a better sense of like what it all amounts to, right? Because it's one thing to say, oh, that's, they've increased this 50% or 10,000 shells a month or what have you, but it's better to understand, I think, maybe the impact of it. So yeah, I think that's pretty much it for this. I guess maybe the one other thing I would mention, I already mentioned this in the report, the Ukrainian State Border Service has said the Belarus stuff is just noise. They don't think anything's going to happen. But some of the GeoInt guys have looked at photos of the tanks and stuff on the ground there. We've not seen one iota of like FPV protection on any of that stuff, and so they're just like, all the GeoInt guys are like, I would stake my life that they're not doing nothing just because of that. So I don't know, I just wanted to mention that because it was just something fun that our guys were doing. Yeah, there you go, nice. Yeah, like that's how they the minute they saw those photos, they're like, this isn't serious because there's no FPV protection, and they would definitely put it. So I don't know, I just thought that was kind of a fun little interesting thing.
Yeah, and it's basically every vehicle. They didn't do anything. So also the tactical markings are incredibly small, which I interpret that they just don't want to bother make big tactical markings and then have to repaint it again later. It's a little minor detail, but yeah, it's just fake. There's no way they're gonna cross. Also because, I mean, all the major bridges have been blown. The roads that are not hindered by any waterways are very heavily fortified, and I think that they wouldn't stand a chance, to be honest. Remember that these are also troops with absolutely zero combat experience, zero motivation. The Belarusian army is generally seen as not very loyal to Lukashenko, even though I'm sure they are loyal because they didn't actually, in a sense, they're loyal because they didn't topple the regime, but he's been nervous about their of them being loyal, etc., in the past. So I think it's completely bluff.
Yeah, I agree. I think, we're certainly not on the bleeding edge of anything by saying that. Hagen Project has come out and said that. Again, Ukraine has basically said as much. But I thought it was just fun the way that you guys process information, right? You guys saw these photos and you were like, no way. So I just thought that I just wanted to share that with the audience. Okay, I think we can move to Q&A now. So thanks, chat, for all your questions. We got quite a few here. So I'll go